It's Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Bonnie Garcia. She was a member of the California State Assembly. She's currently running for the California State Senate. I am so glad you are here, and I'd like to speak with you about your career in the Assembly, and then we'll march through and talk about your Senate race. What are you most proud while you served in the Assembly?
I'm proud of the fact that I represented the border communities and the growing Inland Empire, and that we were able to cross party lines and address issues instead of politics.
Right, you serve as a Republican, and I think it's fair to say that the border communities may not be used to such a party affiliation, but you managed to make it work.
Right, and over the years I've worked in communities. I did housing, neighborhood services, redevelopment, grant writing for local cities. So when I went to people for their vote, they said, Bonnie, you're a Republican? They were surprised that I even had any party affiliation, but they knew my value in the community.
And what's interesting about your party affiliation is it seemed not to matter after you left office, because you served both under a Republican governor and a Democratic governor on the Unemployment Appeals Board.
That's right, and that agency was at the height of the unemployment crisis, 2.5 million people in California unemployed, injured workers, and as you saw recently here in the news, about 50% of the people that appeal their cases get them overturned.
That's remarkable.
It's remarkable.
And sad.
It's very sad, because at the time, people were waiting about 3 months for a decision. And one of the things that I do best is look at a situation, figure out all the moving parts.
Right.
And in a matter of about 18 months, not only did we catch up, but we introduced new technology that reduced wait times, and we met the federal standards after 9 years of failure.
Nice. Now, recently, of course, our state went through reapportionment, redistricting. And what's unique about California is that we have a bicameral legislature, 2 years in the Assembly, 4 years in the Senate. And what that means is that when new lines are drawn, some areas can become orphaned because of the odd way the districts are numbered. In the Inland Empire, there was a district that was represented by Senator Emerson, who has since resigned, but that's another issue. But he was asked to pick up what became an orphan area. Could you explain?
Well, he represented District 23. Because of redistricting, which happens every 10 years after we count people, there were more people in the Inland Empire than the Bay Area. So a new area in Riverside County was created. That seat will not go into an election mode until November 2014.
Of which you're running.
Which I'm running in that seat. Senator Emerson, I live in that community, the caretaker community role that he had is right down the street from my house.
So technically speaking, that community had no senator.
That community is 950,000 people.
With no senator,
With no senator, no way to access state services.
But what winds up happening is the leader of the House, whatever House it is, will, in this case the Senate, of course, will ask a neighboring senator, please act as that senator for this orphan community.
Becomes a custodian of the area. In this case, because the Senate district is so large, 2 senators were asked to represent the area. Southwest Riverside is represented today by Senator Joel Anderson, who represents San Diego.
Even though technically he doesn't represent that area.
And Mr. Emerson was asked to represent the area that is the Coachella Valley.
And so Bill Emerson asked you to come on to be caretaker / rep for those 950,000 people.
Well, people don't remember history, but before I came to the Assembly, I was a field rep for both a senator and an assemblyman, Jim Batten, in that region.
Of course.
And I also worked for local governments for almost 10 years.
Okay.
So it was a natural fit, a bargain for the state.
Right,
They had somebody that had that field experience that could hit the ground running.
Right.
And so I work about 8 hours a week in that area, and I split my time between events, making sure that the schools are represented, constituents have services that they need or have access to state resources.
Now, how is it playing now that Mr. Emerson has resigned?
Well, that was kind of interesting, because now that it's an orphan district with no custodian, you really have nobody. But what the Senate does is they strip the name of the senator out of the district. It's still the 23rd district.
I see.
So there's no opportunity for me to present certificates, for example, with someone's name.
I understand.
However, the office is still available until a new person is elected in.
And so there's a special election, and we don't know what will happen there, obviously. But presumably you would stay on? I mean, hard to know.
I certainly hope so. I want to continue to serve the constituents there. And then my election at the end of the year will determine who will represent the area. It'll no longer be an orphan.
So tell us about the area of the new, is it 28th
It's the new 28th Senatorial District. Rough boundaries are from the Cabazon outlets to the Arizona border with Blythe, and then up over Highway 74, the back part of Hemet, San Jacinto, Anza, down into the Temecula Valley, and then along that 215 corridor to Temescal Valley.
This is a huge geographic district.
Huge.
I mean, every Senate district is about 1 million people, but just because of the geography, you know, some Senate districts could be 15 miles wide, some can be 1,500, I'm exaggerating, but.
It takes me on average about 2.5 hours to get to the other end of the district.
Wow.
And, you know, it's also very different geographically. You have wine country there, and then you have desert on the other side of the mountains.
So what made you decide to return or seek a return to elective office? You left the Assembly in 2008 as a result of term limits. Presumably you've been doing very well since. I would presume such. So what made you decide to return?
You know, I have a degree in education and workforce development. I have a passion for helping people get back into school. I finished school myself in my 30s.
Really?
And working with the Unemployment Appeals Board, I saw the impact that the changing economy had on families. I had an opportunity to work in government from different roles, as a field rep, delivering services, as an elected official, as a bureaucrat working for 2 governors,
of course,
and then working in the private sector. And this was an opportunity to use those skills again in a community as our state was evolving. I certainly believe in the American dream. I certainly believe in the golden state of California. I have grandchildren today. And
how?
How
do you have grandchildren? But we won't go there.
I have an opportunity to help shape their future and for the rest of the children in our state, and I'm really blessed that I have this opportunity.
What's interesting though is when you were serving in the legislature in the last decade, the rules with which budgets were passed were different. You needed a 2/3 majority to pass budgets, and so the Republicans were heavily involved in the process. As you know, the voters changed that, so now you only need a majority vote for a budget, and at the same time, the Democrats have taken a supermajority of 2/3, although who knows what will happen come November of 2014. Be that as it may, it is a different landscape, and so, you know, what do you think about walking into this new world where the Democrats could completely rule the roost?
You know, it really matters how you govern. And what I learned during my 6 years in the Assembly is I represented a district as a Republican that was drawn for a Democrat.
Oh, is that true?
And it was all about the issues. As a matter of fact, one of my counties was 61% Democrat and 21% Republican.
Wow.
Yet I won 3 elections. And I think that, you know, my style of working with Democrats and Republicans is how do we get to yes? How do we deliver services and govern in a way that's smart, that uses our resources intelligently, that we can plan long term? Again, my training in workforce development is all about the moving parts. And I've been successful with my legislation, for example, cell phone bills, AIDS testing for women, diabetes testing for children, you know, looking at enterprise zones and job creation, because I partnered with the Democrats and I didn't let my ego get in the way of good government policies.
And so as we look forward, presuming you are victorious, what do you hope to accomplish in your first year in the California State Senate? Well,
I will be the first Latina Republican in the Senate in our state history.
You are kidding.
So that will make history in itself.
I did not know that. Wow.
And I also believe that winning the seat and putting it back in Republican hands with the loss of potentially 2 Democrat senators here.
Well, that's another conversation. Yes, recent criminal issues, but be that as it may, yes.
Could just break the 2/3 majority in the Senate.
No, that's true.
And I think the last piece is, you know, I hope to act as a bridge for other women to consider a career in government, for other Latina women to consider a career in government, but more importantly, for people to look at government different. It should be for the people and by the people.
Her name is Bonnie Garcia. She is a candidate for the California State Senate in a district representing significant portions of Riverside County. The primary is held in June 2014. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition.
Until what year were California State Senate districts restricted so that one county could only hold 1 seat? 1918, 1938, 1958, or 1968? In 1968, California State Senate districts expanded to include more than 1 seat within individual counties.
Welcome to Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Elliot Duchon. He is the superintendent at Jurupa Unified School District, which is in Riverside County, right next to Riverside, essentially.
Correct.
And so I want to speak with you, sir, about the revolution we are seeing in education, because we really are seeing a revolution, at least in terms of funding. And we look at what's called the local control funding formula, the LCFF, which completely changes the way money flows from Sacramento to local districts. Instead of seeing categoricals, we see a lot more discretion. So talk to us about how LCFF is rolling out at Jurupa Unified.
Well, LCFF is very exciting, and I also have to mention, Brad, that right now we're also implementing Common Core state standards.
Right.
So we are at the crossroads of two of the most exciting things I've seen in my 37 years in public education.
So let's talk about LCFF and Common Core. With LCFF, you are devolving power from Sacramento to the districts in terms of decisions on funding. With Common Core, you could say, since you're creating national standards, you're increasing power in terms of standardization, but then again, there is some local control in terms of Common Core decisions.
Exactly, and there's a place where the two meld together.
Yeah,
First
tell
of
me.
all, LCFF gives local boards the authority to choose really how to develop the curriculum, the types of lessons that go with it, and where to spend the funding, specifically on those children that may need more resources than other children, as specifically free and reduced lunch children, foster youth, and English language learners.
Let me ask you, because as part of the formula, the state has mandated that certain groups come together to offer input. They're called LCAPs, Local Control Accountability Program.
Local Control Accountability Plans.
A lot of acronyms.
Yeah.
And has your community started to have these LCAP meetings?
We have gone out, I think as we speak, to every school in the district. We are having meetings with our association, the Chamber of Commerce.
What are they telling you?
They are telling, well, I have to tell you, Brad, first of all, this is new for them.
Oh, sure.
So we kind of have to start out by saying, we want your input, and we're going to be asking again and again. So basically what we're hearing are two things from parents right now, and that's they want the technology in the classroom desperately, and they want extra instructional opportunities for the children that are having struggling learning. And those two things stand out. The teachers are saying, we need more time for planning. As we talked about Common Core state standards, Common Core is very much more rigorous than current standards.
And completely different than No Child Left Behind.
Different, right.
I mean, it's not the drill and kill. I mean, you're really looking at fewer topics, but moving deeper into the topic.
Exactly. We want kids to think, to explain, to analyze. And in order to do that, teachers are developing lessons where, first of all, students are much more participatory. They teach each other after the teacher does the initial teaching, but the teacher's always got to circle back and look at how are the students doing.
Here's one of the challenges I see with LCFF and LCAP. School districts are getting more money to service the needs of more challenged kids, as you mentioned, foster care, economically disadvantaged English language learners. The money's supposed to be dedicated to those kids. But I presume if you implement a program, it could benefit all kids. So how do you work in such a way so you're standing within the spirit of LCFF, but yet you don't want to have the other kids fall behind?
Excellent question. Well, first of all, as classrooms operate today, we have a range of students in the classroom,
Sure.
much more than probably when you went to school, which was years after I went to school.
Oh, I don't know about that, but be that as it may.
So we have students with all abilities in a single classroom, and teachers are developing lessons that are scaffolded so that the students who are struggling are sitting right alongside maybe your most gifted learners. So the idea is to bring everybody together with the same core curriculum and drill down deeper for the advanced
And
kids.
struggling does not necessarily mean you fall into one of those three categories.
No,
I mean,
absolutely not.
so that presents more and additional challenges.
So where we're focusing is on professional development for teachers, which is our district's 80% unduplicated count on LCFF.
Oh, that's a high number.
So a
So
lot
you're
of what
getting
we're going to do is going
concentration
to be
grants.
across the
Yeah.
board.
Right.
But some of it's going to be on specific programs. So let me mention a couple of those
Please.
and then how we bring them together.
Please, please.
We have a current program in our district, Cafe Literario, which is for parents, actually specifically for mothers. And it's a book club where they read in Spanish and discuss the book And the idea is the more literate parents are, the more literate their children will be. Another program we have is we have 2 dual immersion programs where students are learning in English and Spanish throughout their whole school day. We've just had our first cohort complete elementary school. They'll start middle school next year. And so those programs will be enhanced.
Are the kids 50% English dominant, 50% Spanish dominant?
By the end of the program, they're moving
But
toward,
meaning when they enter.
they're any range from 100% Spanish only to English only.
So how do you decide who enters the program? Lottery?
Anybody can come in. It's a waiting
Really?
list. Yeah.
It's
yeah.
a very popular
So
program.
it's something that it does not matter whether you're English proficient or Spanish proficient.
And by
or
fifth,
Farsi
right,
proficient.
well stated. By 5th grade, how are they speaking?
Very well, and their test scores, they're outperforming
In
our
both
other students.
languages?
Yes.
My question, I love dual immersion. What happens after 5th grade? Because they've learned these 2 languages. Do they get, but there really isn't dual immersion beyond 5th grade.
Oh
usually.
yeah, we have
You
6th
do.
grade, and this will be the first year we're starting in a middle school.
So you're going to take dual
We're
immersion
going
all
to
the
take
way
it right through middle school.
What about high
right?
school?
Well, that's yet to be determined.
Although I would presume that if you're already proficient in 2 languages by 8th grade, it should stay with you?
It should stay with you. Our kids are resilient, Brad.
Right.
I was looking at the stats. One of our high schools, every single one of the top 10 students last year came from Spanish-speaking families, and they came to our district as Spanish only.
Wow.
And they were in the top 10,
Yeah.
and they're going to schools like UCLA
Fantastic.
and Cal State. So
But will you have advanced language for these students in high school, presumably?
we already do.
So they're in good
right,
shape.
Right.
Let me shift gears, if I may, and talk to you about what's known as transitional kindergarten.
Right.
That has been a plan that's been proposed by the Democratic leadership in the Assembly and the Senate in Sacramento. The governor has been a little wary on whether he wants to create this new program. What's your sense of TK and whether the state should move down that path?
Absolutely. I think I started as a preschool teacher, so my heart's there. And the younger you reach kids, we always talk about we can't do anything about kids' family background, but we can do a lot about the kids and their parents, and TK does that.
I guess what I would ask is, I think the science is clear that TK is of benefit.
Right.
But we know that K-12 suffered draconian cuts over the last 5 years. I don't know that we're fully restored to pre-recession levels. So is now the time to start TK when we're not fully restored?
Well, excellent question and a tough one for a school
No doubt, of
administrator.
course. You're not a legislator,
and the legislation's they're gonna have trouble figuring out this because technically it's outside of Prop 98.
Would it stay outside of Prop?
I don't know.
That's a great question.
They're
That's a good question.
They're very good at that.
Right.
You can ask the next
Right,
legislator
I
that's on
wonder, yeah.
that's here. But I think the answer, Brad, is yes, because
It would be outside or inside?
well, no, that it's a good thing.
Okay.
As the state economy builds, we need to build solid things that work for kids and educating our children so by the time they get out, they enter the workforce.
At the same time, assuming this program passes, how will you gear up to put it into into effect?
Well, we are going to look at strong academic models of kindergarten and preschool.
Right.
We've already been doing those with California State Preschool and Head Start. So
And as you know, I don't mean to cut you off, but
okay.
the age for kindergarten has increased.
Right.
So you have these 2 currents kind of marching at the same time, TK, but then you just increase the age, to get into kindergarten. So
what I'm hoping
Yes.
is that as we reach kids at a younger age, we make up for some of the deficits of poverty, because they're clear. Kids come to school from impoverished families, hearing almost 1/4 of the words kids from upper class families
true?
hear. Absolutely.
That is
So 13
unbelievable.
million words is what a child hears by age 4 if they're from an impoverished family.
And
26 million for a middle class family, and 47 million for an upper class
you're
family.
coming back. I love your
So-
statistics.
and that's startling. But
hear
I
you.
can't accept, Brad, that's going to be a deficit
Okay,
for
will you
life.
come back?
Absolutely.
He's Elliot Duchon, Superintendent of Jurupa Unified. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Charter California Edition.
What percentage of students in California are English language learners? 16, 25, 31, or 36%? According to the PPIC, nearly 25% of California students are English language learners.
Welcome, it's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Patricia Lock-Dawson. She is the president of Riverside School Board, Riverside Unified. Congratulations, Madam President.
Thanks, Brad.
And you became president in November. What does that mean?
Well, it means I get to run the meetings every week and
Right.
keep them on time. So that's
Okay,
probably the
fair
biggest,
enough.
most important thing. But also leading the school in leading the district in a whole new era, I think, is the biggest challenge.
That is an understatement.
Yeah.
That is an absolute understatement. When you look at what's happening in California, it's nothing short of a revolution. You have so many currents kind of coming at you at one time. On the one hand, you have what's known as the local control funding formula, which changes the way schools are funded. On the other hand, you have the Common Core standards, which changes the way education is kind of meted out.
Right.
And one is very centralized, being Common Core. Local control is just that, local.
It is, and that's the great promise of local control funding formula, is that the government and the governor has decided to give us, the districts, control over what we think our priorities are and what we think needs to be done. And our role is to go out as a district and go out in the community and say, what is it that you think will make our students successful?
So let's talk about that, because there's another acronym. It's LCAP,
Yes.
Local Control and Accountability Plan, and Riverside is taking that very seriously. You have this program, Success for Students, at successforstudents.org, and you are going to the community and you are asking your community, what do you want us to do? What are your priorities? What are they? You've already had meetings. What are they saying?
Yeah, well, a big part is just providing the resources that our kids need to succeed, having access to courses that they need to get into college,
Right.
making sure they're getting counseling that they need, making sure that teachers are well prepared with Common Core. That's the craziest
Right.
part. And then, of course, one of the other things is, getting a superintendent on board.
Yeah, that's a whole other issue.
That's a whole
You
other
have an
issue.
interim right now.
So
but
we
be
hear
that
that.
as it may, but here's what's kind of tricky for all school districts. Part of the local control funding formula, you get that base grant, and that's fine. And it's higher than it had been in the past, so that's great news. But then, for each student that falls into a targeted category, foster care, ESL, or economically disadvantaged, you get a bump. And then if you have 55% or more in those categories, you get another very significant bump. Riverside falls into that second category. So you have this chunk of money that's really supposed to be dedicated to a targeted population, but then you have this base grant,
Right.
and it's in two different pots and two different.
Well, I got to tell you, Brad, you get an A+ for figuring out the
Right.
local control funding
Okay, there you
formula,
have it.
because folks have a really difficult
Right.
time understanding it. That's right. We do get a base grant, which we think it's kind of difficult to say, but across the board, on average, we're probably going to get about $7,900.
I've heard something about that. Yes.
Around that.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we're going to get some additional money, or what's called supplemental
Right.
funds. And you're right, that does. It goes to 3 subcategories:
Right.
foster youth, those who are economically disadvantaged, and also English language learners.
Right.
So that's part of our LCAP process.
Right.
We're integrating that as going out and saying, how best can those funds address those 3 groups? And so a lot of the representatives we are inviting to these meetings represent some of those subgroups.
But what's interesting is when you look at those 3 groups, at first glance, they may seem to have similar interests. But look, just because you're an English language learner doesn't mean that you're economically disadvantaged.
You're right.
And you could be super bright and be an English language learner. Economically disadvantaged also could be very bright.
Yes.
And so it really makes it so very challenging to figure out how best to serve these children.
And to make it even more complicated, within Riverside Unified School District, we've done a wonderful job of integrating our schools.
Right,
So
right.
We don't have really a lot of schools that are in dire poverty or
I
that are
see.
in, really wealthy. Most of our schools are a mix of all of those kids.
So how did you get to that 55% cap? Is it you have...
It's overall, so it's for the entire population.
Right, but is it that are your targeted more ESL or more economically disadvantaged? Do you know? Or is there kind of a nice mix?
Yeah, it is. It's a
Right.
real mix of them. So I wouldn't even hazard to say
Right.
what the
That's
predominant
fine.
category is, because we are in that category for that reason. So
Right.
it's up to us now. And that's the magic
Right,
of the local,
exactly.
is that we're supposed to decide, okay, which one of those are most needful? Which one
Right.
of those do we need? Are they all equally needy?
And then here's a question. So let's say you get consensus around this notion of decreasing class size. Now that's going to benefit everyone. But can you use LCFF targeted money to decrease class size if it helps everyone?
Yeah, you can, because the idea is that you have to show some progress, you have to show outcomes,
Right.
so it has to improve the entire district.
Okay.
So that money, it is targeted for those groups, but it's also, again, back to the local
Right.
and the accountability plan. Accountability is a key word. We need to show that those groups are benefiting,
Right.
even if we use that money for the whole, for a whole nother group.
And
So-
what's also interesting is, presumably, if you're an English language learner, the goal is to bring you to English language proficiency. If you reach that level of proficiency, you no longer are one of those targeted students, and that could cause a loss of money to the district. So it's a bit perverse.
Well, it is, but we would love to put ourselves out of the supplemental business. I mean,
That's
honestly,
fair. No, you're
because
very well
we
stated.
want to help these children, and I think the other thing is too there are districts across the state already that lost money this last year because of that, because they didn't reach that count.
So they had
didn't.
successes.
So some of them who had been getting money actually reduced funding. Some of them who were in dire need got a lot
Right.
more money. Riverside's kind of in the middle, so
Okay.
we have a little bit more. I think our budget, the governor's budget right now says we're probably going to get about $15 million this year than last year. And
that's
remember,
real.
that's after $100 million.
I know, we know
in
that.
cuts.
Yes.
And then I think next year it's slated to go up an additional $30 million.
Right.
So I think we are seeing progressive increases in funding.
In the background, you have Common Core, which at some level is a cross current against local control because you're having to meet certain standards. There is the element of local innovation, but still it's changing the way children are educated. It's not the drill and kill. It's much more.
Julie.
Yeah,
No, it
yeah,
isn't.
yeah.
It's a more creative approach.
Right.
I think it does truly reinstate the art of teaching.
Right. And not art meaning drawing, but
Right.
literally the art
yeah,
of
the
it.
art and skill of it, and it, back to the local thing again. It's sort of putting the hands of, or putting the ability to teach back in the hands of the teachers as well, where they're not being dictated to every minute of the
But
day.
are you ready? Because we know, and we'll speak with Brent Lee about this coming up, one of your colleagues on the Riverside School Board. We know that there's a certain standardized testing regimen that is changing and changing fast. In California, it's changing this spring. And all standardized testing is supposed to happen on a computer. Y'all got the computers?
We are in good shape.
You
We
are. How lucky for
Our
you.
USD is in good shape. We were actually kind of leading the pack ahead of that.
I'm sure you've heard your friends at LAUSD. Not in good shape. Not in good shape.
I'm not on their board.
No,
I
but I'm
can't
sure you've
comment
read
on
the
that.
same article. But
I've
meaning just
read, yeah.
factually, they just don't. They don't have the resource. They don't have their computers.
Well, we were out ahead in that we really looked into what devices would be the most effective. We did a very thorough analysis of what are the minimum we could get away with
Right.
where all children could still be tested in the same
Here's
window.
the problem, I think. So I'm sure all the kids know how to use the devices. It's the teachers. I mean, honestly, how do you teach the teachers how to use these devices?
Oh my gosh! No, I got to tell you, I was in a classroom yesterday, and there was a teacher in there who was she was their technology support person, and she was going around to each of the
Yeah,
classrooms.
but she's the expert. What about you and me? If we don't know how to use these
Hey,
iPads.
my kids teach me how to use a
That's
computer all the
point.
time.
That's the point.
No, actually, our teachers we have a lot of money set aside for professional
Right,
development just
right.
for these things. So, and actually, we put together a really innovative group, which I thought was wonderful, combination of teachers and our district staff and community members that came together and decided, how are we going to get the one-time money that we're receiving
Right.
from the governor? We've got $8 million that we're
Right,
getting.
Common Core
Implementation money.
Right.
And so they came together and decided, well, I think we need this much for the computers, this much for professional
Right.
development. And it actually worked out very well. It was a very
that's good to hear.
amicable coming together. So as I said, we're in really good
Okay,
shape.
Madam President, thank you for joining us. Her name is
no,
Patricia
thank you.
Lock-Dawson. She is the president of the Riverside Unified School District. I'm Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition.